All right, so we'll start the meeting, call to order. Any changes to the agenda tonight? Hearing none. How about public comment? Anyone from the public out there, Eric?
We do have public in the room and online.
Yep.
So
anyone in the public want to speak on anything not on tonight's agenda?
I was going to say, typically we go to public in the room first for any comments. So if you want to offer anything? No. Okay, no comments in the room. It looks like our member online has their hand raised to talk. So if you could announce yourself and...
Hi.
Hi. All you show up is S.
My name is Sarah, and I apologize that it's loud. I'm actually walking over there right now. I have never attended one of these, so I apologize for not knowing the format. I was wondering if we could discuss the intersection of Dion and Allen Street.
Okay, that wouldn't be here.
It would not be there. Okay.
No. That would be, okay. Well, there was a meeting. Did you go to the meeting on LaFountain Street? What was it, Christine? Help me with the scoping study?
Okay. Oh, I apologize. I thought that's what this was.
No, this is Planning Commission.
Okay.
But you're welcome to stay.
I think I might be looking at the wrong agenda then.
Okay.
Sarah, you were probably thinking of that. We had that on the city council meeting on Monday night. So the meeting happened. It will be coming back to the city council at a future meeting. You are also welcome to come to any upcoming city council meeting during that public comment. So we'll be meeting again May 20th at 6 p.m. at City Hall or via Zoom.
Will a link go out in first form about that?
Yeah, it will. And also, if you would like, you could email me directly as well.
Yeah, would you be able to? I think I might head home then. I think I'm going to turn around. But would you be able to share your email address in the chat?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry to take up your time, guys.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks for stopping in. Maybe sometime you'll join us for a whole meeting. They're so exciting.
I'm new to the area, so I probably will. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Sarah.
Quickly, Eric, I can only message hosts and panelists. Would you be able to put my email in for everyone?
Yes, it's just klot@Winooski VT.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other people in the public?
There is nobody else online and no one else in the room.
Okay. All right. So then we'll move to approval of the previous meeting minutes. And I see only Sarah and I are here. Do Tommy, Abby, and Joe wish to abstain, or would you like to go ahead and vote on this?
I'd like to abstain.
Me too.
All right. So we'll just put the approval of minutes off to the next meeting then, okay?
Yep, that's fine. We can take those.
All right. So then we go into continued discussion on unified land use and development regulations, amendments related to statutory changes. Eric.
Yes, thank you very much. What's included with the agenda tonight is the statutory report in our lead up to the public hearing. At our last meeting on whatever that was, April 25th, the Planning Commission set a public hearing for May 23rd to take public comments on the draft amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations. Specifically, as with all public hearings, that doesn't require you to take any action. You can also make changes at that hearing or after the hearing, or you can forward amendments on to City Council for their consideration. So I wanted to put this, or Mike and I talked, and we decided to bring this forward to you all so that you could at least see the full amendment package. I know some of you were not at the last meeting, so you did not get a chance to see some of the changes. So what I wanted to do is just walk through the amendments. Not necessarily get into any serious discussion about them tonight, because we can do that at the public hearing, but just to bring everybody up to speed on where we are with the amendments and what's included. Also, I have a couple of changes from our last meeting that I'll highlight. This is, just for reference, the information you had in the agenda is what was advertised for the public hearing as well. So this is what the public has available to them for that hearing. So I'm going to share my screen. And then,
Eric, did you just say that we're not going to be making substantial changes tonight?
Abby, we can note those changes, but it would probably be best if we talk about those at the hearing to actually formalize the changes so that they'll be done in the context of the hearing and so that the public is aware of what is being changed, since this is what was advertised for that hearing.
But let me chime in, because we did want to allow the folks who weren't here at the last meeting a chance to give input. So if there is something that sticks out,
Correct.
Feel free to talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you, Mike. It's not to suggest that we should not talk about the amendments, but just to, if we're going to be making substantive changes, we should probably do that in the context of the hearing or at the hearing so that what is advertised, well, we wouldn't be able to make any of the changes formal until we did the hearing anyway, so because this was already advertised for the hearing. So, but very good question. So the first couple pages of the application of the packet are just the report, the statutory report outlining consistency with the state's requirements. So I'm just going to kind of cruise through things. Please stop me if you need to discuss anything or want to discuss anything. So the first section, Article 2, we have a couple changes. Nothing new in the under the applicability in 2.3. That remains the same as it's been under item E. And I'll apologize for the scrolling. Under the land use table, from the previous version to this version, we did make some updates to the multi-unit development or multi-unit dwellings, the 5+ units. So it was previously in the last version at our April 25th meeting, it was noted as permitted in the residential C. I think there was some confusion about why we were calling that permitted. Mostly it was in relation to the fact that we are allowing 5 or more units as part of a planned unit development with specific conditions. So we're not allowing that as a use just in general. So now there's this note that says see section 5.14, which is our reference to the priority housing requirements that we've established already that are already included. So that change has been made so that to indicate that multi-unit dwellings are not permitted in the in any of the residential districts unless the standards of the priority housing are met, which, as for reference, priority housing is dwellings that are affordable or three or more bedrooms or both.
And just to clarify, not multi-unit dwellings, because we allow 3 and 4, but 5+ multi-unit dwellings.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, I'm sorry, I messed up. I hit some button on this computer that logged me out. So where are you right now?
Not much further than where we just were. I'm in the land use table.
Okay, and were you talking about the 5+ units?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Because I'm still, as I said before, I'm still in favor of making 5+ units at least a conditional use in the RC zone and limiting how many units per building in that zone. But we can talk about it at the public hearing.
Yep.
Because I know there's other people that disagree with that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So nothing else on that section has changed. We did add retail sales, neighborhood commercial as a conditional use in the residential A, just for consistency with the rest of the districts, the residential districts. I believe that's the only, I think that's the only other significant, or not significant, the only other change to the land use table. Everything else on this section is the same as it was. All the footnotes remain the same as they were or have been. When we get into the dimensional tables, the only thing that's changed here, all the dimensions in the primary or principal structure are the same as they were previously. The accessory structure, we did add under the maximum height. We did add a caveat. So it always read that it was 75% of principal or primary structure, but no less than 10 feet. With the footnote of the accessory dwellings could go up to 20 feet. We've now added this upper limit to cap it at 25 feet for an accessory structure. So it'd be no less than 10 or no more than 25. And that was from some discussion at our last meeting. There was the point was made that we allow for 35 feet of height in our of the primary structure. So 75% of that would be, I think, like 26 feet or somewhere in there is what we calculated it out to be. So or an odd ratio of numbers. So we decided to limit the upper end as well, just in case. Yeah, it'd be 26.25 feet at 75% of the maximum height in the residential districts. So this now puts an upper limit on the height of a primary, of an accessory structure in those districts. Okay, moving along. Here's where I've added some additional language. There was new language added at our last meeting in the descriptions of the districts, but to try to kind of get at some of the density component, I did add some additional language that talks about the number of units that would be permitted. So in this case, the density of approximately 5 units per acre in the residential A, density of approximately 8 units per acre in the residential B, and density of approximately 14 units per acre in the residential C. Just to clarify, those density limits are based solely on the number of lots that could be created based on the minimum lot size that's required. So for example, in the residential A, the minimum lot size we're proposing is 7,500 square feet. So that divided by 1 acre is 5 and change, so rounding down to what you could create on a lot. So it does not take into account special conditions or considerations like planned unit developments, where you'd be able to potentially get more density than that. This is just what's being reflected on an as-right or a by-right basis for density. So
just to throw a wrench in it, wouldn't it be really 10 units if you get 5 lots and you can put 2 units per lot?
well, you could potentially put up to 4 units per lot.
Right, but I mean, but in, like in the RA, if you're doing 3 or 4, isn't that a conditional use? Did I remember that?
Yes. No, sorry. It would have to go through site plan review if you're doing 4 units.
Right, which makes a conditional use, right?
I mean, it's similar, but it's not exclusively a conditional use. We have to have it as a permitted use per statute. Act 47 requires that it remain as a permitted use. But
Okay.
It's a permitted use, not a
Correct.
conditional use. Yep.
yes, but we'd still, right now, our standards require that those go through site plan review. Anything more than 2 units.
And where is that written up?
That is in section 6.6, I believe.
Is it part of the review that we're doing today?
That is not part of this review. No, we're not proposing any changes to that section at this time.
Okay.
But it's in Article 6 somewhere. I don't remember the exact citation off the top of my head, but yeah, site plan review and all the criteria that go with it would apply to anything over 2 units.
And to Mike's point about the number of units per acre, is it 4 times 5? Because you can do up to 4 units in a building?
Well, I guess it could be. So I'm simply expressing it basically on a single unit basis with these definitions. We could express it differently if you want.
Would it be more accurate to say buildings instead of units?
Or 5
buildings?
lots. It's really 5 lots per acre.
Yeah, it is. That's true. So yeah, that could clarify that it's up to 5 lots per acre.
Okay.
And then that would carry forward to the RB and RC.
Yep.
So added this language, like I said, to kind of get to the density question that we talked about at a previous meeting, just to kind of show some gradation of these 3 residential districts and kind of what those categorical differences look like. So nothing else in Article 2. I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit because there's nothing new proposed in Article 3 either, which is our downtown district specifically.
Can I ask one quick question here?
Sure.
What is the ceiling height, the required ceiling height, interior ceiling height on a floor?
I believe our municipal code in the housing chapter requires a minimum of 7 feet.
Okay.
Interior height for it to be considered livable space.
So could you get, in a 25-foot building, could you get 3 full floors? I mean, that's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24.
It would be tight because you got space between the floors too.
Yeah, I think it doesn't allow 3, it just allows 2.
I mean, I think it would be possible. Whether it be practical is another question. Just because.
Well, yeah, I would just hate for a building to be put up that was not comfortable. You know what I mean? Sure, we're going to cram in another floor of living just because we can.
I'm surprised if anybody would do that just because dimensions of lumber don't come in. You're basically buying lumber to be thrown away to save space. Or buying building materials that you're throwing away just based on standard building material dimensions.
We could have gone south if you were to rent that place for a long time. That cost might be worth it. Just ask this question.
It's possible, whether or not practical, I think is another question. I don't know if the state would allow something like that because it's a building state's going to have to review it anyway. So I don't know if the state would allow that.
Okay.
But technically, based on our housing regulations in our municipal code, we do allow for a ceiling height, minimum ceiling height of 7 feet interior. So, okay, like I said, in Article 3, nothing new. It's all related to the downtown core. In Article 4, not really there's anything new here either from our last meeting. One thing I was looking at this the other day, and this is something that I may bring forward to the public hearing related to the residential and non-residential driveways. We are proposing to increase the number of for multi-unit to 5, 1 to 5 residential dwelling units. I'm actually, something that I've been thinking about is whether or not we should even have, so right now it's not showing here, but we have a, Part E of Section 4.2 is for residential driveways. And actually, let me just look at the language. So we differentiate it between just residential of, I think right now it says 3 or fewer, and then the multi-unit and non-residential at what is currently existing 3 or more. One of the things that I've been thinking about is really related to this driveway distance for multi-unit and non-residential from adjacent property boundaries that it needs to be at least 25 feet away. This may create some issues, just given the fact that we've got a lot of narrow lots, and if we're adding, for example, somebody comes in, if they have a narrow lot that's very deep, and they're doing a planned unit development with 5 units, they may have to move their driveway to a location that doesn't work or isn't even possible. So what I was thinking about is that leaving this section, Part F, just for non-residential driveways. So for any type of commercial buildings, office buildings, things like that, they would have a minimum setback of 20 feet. And then we would just capture all our residential driveways under one category, which allows them to be up to, I believe, 5 feet to the property boundary, which a lot of our properties already are and already have that component. So it would save from having to move a driveway to a location that otherwise may not be feasible on a lot, and therefore limit the number of units that they might be able to put on a lot, even if they're permitted. So I'll bring you more information on that at a future meeting or at our next meeting. But that's something that I think is a fairly simple change. It's just hard to explain without actually seeing it in writing. So.
Do you know where the 25 feet number came from?
I don't. My guess is that is intended to provide some separation between curb cuts for non-residential uses, so that you don't have a bunch of non-residential uses that might have higher turnover in traffic right next to each other.
Yep.
That's the only thing I can think of, is that it's really intended to space out some of those driveways. The other thing is if we have a property that's proposing 5 or more units, it's going to go through site plan review, and that'll all be looked at from Public Works and the Development Review Board as well. So they will evaluate any conditions that may be necessary for the siting of an actual driveway, or a new driveway, I should say, since this applies to new driveways. So anyway.
Eric, I have a question.
Sure.
The stuff that's already part of our regulation, like it's already gone through the process and is part of the current language, can it be not highlighted in red and underlined? Because it's sort of confusing. If I was the public, I would think everything red and underlined was up for discussion.
Well, in this case, it is.
Okay, so if you back up, because maybe I'm not understanding. If you back up to the section before that you kind of quickly went over and said nothing has changed.
In Article 3, you mean?
Article, yeah, 3.6.
Okay.
And then all of the required bike parking stuff is still highlighted.
Yes, that's
Has that
yeah.
changed?
Good question. For clarification, so we added all the bicycle parking into Article 4 in our general parking standards. The parking standards in Article 3 are specific to the downtown core and did not exist previously. So this is all new language to add to match what we included in Article 4 for bicycle parking. So we're proposing to require bicycle parking in the downtown core as well.
Okay, so if this were to come up for discussion and any changes proposed, then we would have to go back to the other article and also make changes so that it's consistent?
We could. We don't have to, but we could. The language that's in here now under bicycle parking is exactly what's in Article 4, and any changes to Article 4 are also under the bicycle parking, because we did have a couple minor tweaks, are also reflected in the bicycle parking under Article 3.
Okay, and then the table right above that deals with minimum off-street vehicle parking.
Yep.
Sorry, I probably missed this discussion, but I know we have the 1 space per dwelling unit as a part of Act 47, and then it looks like the only other category is 1 space per sleeping room for lodging or bed and breakfast. So all of the other uses that are crossed out, what is their parking requirement, or do they have no parking
Yeah, so
minimums?
they would have no minimum off-street parking. We would basically, because it's in a downtown setting and because of the, sorry, I'm on the wrong table. Because it's in a downtown setting, because we have the parking garage, because we have on-street metered parking in the downtown core, it was, at a previous discussion, it was determined that basically all these other uses are gonna be high turnover anyway, or are intended to have high turnover, and we have public parking available, so that we don't need to dedicate parking for commercial or restaurant or office or the other uses that are listed, only for residential or lodging establishments.
But we have a lot of these uses not in the downtown.
Right, so this only applies to downtown.
So this section only applies to the downtown commercial business district. Just trying to get my
Yep.
my head wrapped around what area of town we're talking about.
No, good question. Let me bring up a map here for you. So the regulations under Article 3 will only apply to this red area in the downtown core. Ah. So basically from Main Street east to Cassavant and from East Allen down to the river.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that and showing the areas. I'm just looking for the language in the beginning of section 3 that sort of designates it as only downtown. I see it 3.6 development in and around downtown Winooski. Regulations will apply to any new development or redevelopment in the downtown core district. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yep, good questions. Good questions. But yeah, the Article 3 is only for the downtown, and Article 4 parking is for everything outside of the downtown.
Gotcha.
Okay, so none of that has changed, as I mentioned. So yeah, so driveways. All right, let me make sure I'm in the right spot here myself. Conversion or change of use, that's nothing new. Parking requirements. So yeah, as I mentioned, there's a couple of small tweaks in here. Nothing new from our previous discussions. We're capturing the change in Act 47 for 1 space per unit, and just some language changes for consistency. And then just a few small edits somewhere. Oh yeah, here's one with the outdoor covered that we talked about previously on the bicycle parking. But then none of the substantive parts of this section have changed. Just a few minor word changes. And then the dimensions, as we talked about previously, referring to public works standards rather than having specific dimensions. This is something that actually came up again in one of the current housing bills that may just pass out of one of the chambers or both chambers today, possibly. That I believe the last version I saw did have minimum dimensional requirements for parking. So this kind of takes all that out of our regulations and puts it in public works where it can be easily changed as necessary if statute changes, for example. So, but there's some fairly common standards for those dimensions. So anyway, all right, next up is Article 5. I don't believe there's anything new in the majority of these sections. When I say the majority, I'm going to skip ahead to the section 514.
Can I just on section 5.4,
Yep.
Which we struck the garage. I know seems kind of ridiculous. We struck the garage sale language altogether.
Yep.
And I actually went and I looked up. I just was looking what other communities do, and I found the one that South Burlington uses, and it says garage yard sales are permitted no more than 8 times per year. Each separate day counts as a separate sale for any given property. You do not need a permit. We do ask that you refrain from posting signage, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess we talked about that a little bit before, and I just sort of feel like I grew up next to somebody who had one of these permanent garage sales in their house all the time. It was sort of strange. So I don't know. It seems like there is language usually about garage and yard sales in most communities, and I think maybe we should keep it in there, or a version of it.
Well, so Sarah, the language you just quoted, if I heard you correctly, says it does not
Yep.
permit.
Yes, right.
So there's really no way to police that or enforce it. Even though it says you can do it 8 times a year, if there's no permitting requirement, then there's nobody that's really going out to check on any of the number of times. So it kind of is a regulation without a regulation.
Well, why do communities do it then?
Honestly, I have no idea, and I don't know, because the situation that you described, where it's kind of a permanent yard sale, that would be a situation where we would treat that as a business, not as a yard sale. If it's something that's more permanent and is constantly happening, then we would treat that as a non-residential use, and then we could issue a violation or take enforcement action against it because it's a commercial use, not a residential use.
Okay, that covers it then. I understand.
There's other mechanisms to get concerned rather than somebody who just wants to sell some stuff on a Saturday.
I'm not worried about the Saturday sale. It's people that want to permanent.
Right.
Does that administratively kind of dovetail into somebody who's basically an unregistered or unlicensed car dealer? Because they follow kind of similar pattern. People who have a car for sale in front of their house, and it's like, oh, they're just selling their car, but then you're like, oh, you had 10 different cars for sale this year.
Right. Yeah, we would do it the same way. That if it's something that's pretty much like on an ongoing basis, we have other mechanisms to enforce that rather than through some sort of garage sale provision.
Okay.
So if it became a problem, the city could do something about it. It was problematic. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Sure. Okay, so under section 5.14, this is our incentives for priority housing. There are some changes here. Some of it's required by statute, some because statute changed and changed our regulations, or made our incentives no longer incentives. So probably the main things that have changed is under the incentives. So planning and developments, we previously had the residential A and B allowing 4 units per building, and residential C allowing 6 units per building. So now we're changing it to any of the residential districts can do up to 6 units per building, provided that in this case, at least 50% of the dwellings in the overall project or proposal meet the qualifications of the bedroom count. So at least half of the units need to have 3 bedrooms or more to qualify to do the 6 units per building. In addition, we're granting 15% additional lot coverage to accommodate any additional size that might be needed to add those extra bedrooms. The density bonus has not changed, except that we are allowing some additional lot coverage as well, because the density bonus comes from planned unit development where all of the units are affordable and have 3 or more bedrooms. So this will create an incentive to actually go down that road. I think previously limiting the lot coverage to the base lot coverage of 50% may not actually provide an incentive to anybody to do an entire project of 3 bedroom and affordable. So that's the only change here, is to add the additional lot coverage, but I believe that was something we've talked about previously as well. And then minimum parking is still the same.
Let me interrupt you, Eric. Yeah. I'm just gonna, again, I still have a, I don't say a concern. I guess I still feel like the RC zone should allow, be differentiated a little bit more because it is a higher density zone than the other districts. And when you put the incentives in, we're kind of recognizing that, because you can get an extra unit per dwelling per lot in the RC zone versus half a unit in the RA. So either, I think those should either be the same, or we change the number of units allowed per building in the RC a little bigger. But again, we can have that discussion at the public hearing. I just throw that out there for people to chew on.
Well, that's a good point, Mike. We could basically coalesce all item I, double I, and triple I into one, so that it's just one additional number or percent of unit that's being permitted. But yes, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think there's nuance to leaving these gradations in the document, because I don't think the number of units is only indicator of density. I mean, just the way our zoning has been set up historically is created least sense to most sense through the districts, and that's done through a variety of things, including lot coverage and setback and number of units. And so it's worth discussing, but I don't think it's like, I don't think forcing additional units into RC is required to keep it and or to continue to be the densest. They also have the smallest lot sizes that we're putting units on. So,
well, to your point, I don't think it's going to be a big deal for most lots in town. And if you limit it, so what? If someone can put 6 units on a property in one building, for developers, it's cheaper to build.
Yeah, I mean, it also goes back to this whole idea where like our incentives have to be actual incentives. And if you keep upping the baseline, there's nothing to incentivize off of. And we're trying to get at these things that the market isn't naturally doing, which is these larger units, these more homeownership opportunities. And the more units you allow on a property, the more incentive you are to have an outside investor come in and put tiny units on it to fit as much as possible to make the most revenue off the property. So there's like implications of just, it's not as easy as saying, like, let's just load up the units for RC. And I think the neighbors, there's implications. We've heard from a couple neighbors, I think 3 or 4 neighbors that wrote in about their concerns with that too. So I just want to make sure we're thinking like long-term about what that means and how they interact with these incentive and priority housing.
Understood, but again, my point is we have to allow 4 units in the RA and RB. And if the RC is really a higher density district, then allow someone to put more units in a building. And I understand that that doesn't necessarily increase the density, but it allows for a bigger building. And there are restrictions on height and all that stuff anyway. So the dimensional requirement is going to dictate if you can put that many units in a building. And maybe the number is just 5, I don't know. But just some differentiation, and then the incentive, you bump up by 2 units like you do in the RB and RC. But we can discuss it at the public hearing. I'm probably the only one touting this, and that's fine. If the rest of the commission doesn't want to do it, that's the right of the commission, and that's what I go with.
Okay. So a new section that was discussed at the last meeting is the bonus story. This is based on statute. This is what we have to require for statute. So we had a bonus story provision in our gateway district, which is now referenced to this section, and I've got language in the document that talks about that as well. So again, this is all straight from statute, the bonus story part under part 3 here. So not really much we can do with that. And then there's a new section here, this administrative review. So this is something that we reviewed at the last meeting, but again, since some of you were not at that meeting, basically what this is saying is that if half of the units in a project, because we have site plan review for anything over 2 units right now, this is a provision that will allow a project to not have to go through site plan review if at least half of the units in the project were affordable and met the bedroom count and were offered for sale. It's the for sale piece that's kind of the differentiation here. So the project can still have conditions imposed. If it's a planned unit development, or if they need any type of relief, if they're proposing a conditional use as part of it, or any waivers for the setbacks, that still has to go to the development review board. But if they're able to bring something forward that's strictly a 4 or fewer units, it would be 4 or fewer units that half of them are affordable, have at least 3 or more bedrooms, and are offered for sale, then it can go through an administrative review process. And I think.
So Eric, I'm sorry, I'm trying to see this where it says 4 units or less.
Well, so because we're talking about the, and maybe that's what I'm missing here. This is intended for the residential districts.
Yep.
So in residential districts, we only allow 4 units unless it's by planned unit development.
Right.
So the planned unit development is captured under item B. Under item C. So if you're proposing as a planned unit development, then you'd be doing more than 4 units if you're doing a planned unit development. So it's not explicit. So I can add some language to make that explicit.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm trying to see, going back and trying to see, I think in the heading, you should have in the residential zones, so it's clear too.
Yep. But this would be a potential incentive for, to offer some ownership as well, to get out of that site plan review process and just do an administrative review for the smaller projects.
Makes sense.
And sorry, you're saying that smaller projects, meaning, sorry, what was the definition of a smaller project?
Well, in this case, it would be 4 or fewer units.
4 or fewer units could be eligible for administrative review as long as they have 50% of the project that meets affordability, bedroom count, and sale.
Correct.
As long as 50% of that.
Yep.
And then I have a question about the lot coverage. We've added lot coverage to each of the incentives that we have currently have in place, and I'm wondering why we're adding additional lot coverage that we have now.
So I think the addition of the lot coverage is going to make it easier to take advantage of those incentives. And actually, I was just going to ask if you all want to include a lot coverage, a bonus under the administrative review section as well. But looking at what the requirements are to meet looking at what you have to do to get the incentive, for example, doing projects with 3 bedrooms to do a 16-unit building configuration, you're going to have larger buildings that way. And if we're restricting it still to the base lot coverage, it's going to get harder to put enough units on to make the project work, I think. So,
and the feedback that you've gotten based on how it's written in our current standard.
Sorry, say that again.
Is that have you got feedback since this is already like codified in our land use regulations? Have you got feedback that this is hard to do because of the lot coverage requirements? I'm just trying to sort of understand where.
It's a good question. I actually have had conversations with several folks that were looking at doing just a standard 4-unit building, and they could not make it work on the properties that they were trying to put them on because of the lot coverage limitation. So my thought was, if we're going to allow for some additional lot coverage, then we should get something in return, which is what the incentives are for. So that, because the one project I had some discussions on, they were looking at potentially configuring or trying to get property from another lot to add to the lot so that they could meet the lot coverage requirement. So we're not getting it. So in order to avoid a situation where we have larger properties being slithered off to add to smaller properties to get to that size that allow lot coverage, the property under lot coverage maximum, offering the incentive to get something in return seems like a good exchange to me.
Okay, so in this case, we would be 65% lot coverage if they do 50%, and then we would be at 75% lot coverage, up to 75% lot coverage if they were 100% with the drone, and now you're proposing in the administrative review. I guess that's
I wanted to see if that was something you all would be interested in considering, potentially a 15% bump as well to a 65%.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting that the need to really own a definition for what lot coverage is and what's not lot coverage to have a better, if we're looking for 75% of what they need to code with impervious and buildings being not significant. So it only needs 25% quote unquote open space or non-covered space. I want to make sure that sounds clear first, like is that right? And then make sure we have a definition of that open space so it's meaningful. Open space and not sidewalks and staircases and medians and lots. So
we do have a definition of lot coverage currently. In Article 9, we do have a definition of lot coverage. We have added or amended several years ago. We did amend it. So it basically says that anything that is impervious is considered lot coverage.
Except where sidewalks, even doorways are considered outdoor staircases are considered lot coverage. Medians and parking lots are considered lot coverage. So there's a way you have your little bit of lot coverage for your lots that you are supposed to cover. There's ways to
So I'm looking at the definition right now. It says this portion includes non-limited all areas covered by buildings, park structures, alleyways, road sidewalks, and any area of pavement. So sidewalks are considered part of lot coverage.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Has told us that if it's just a walking into a building, it's not considered as an considered property with private space for lot coverage. And same is true for exterior staircases. And again, medians. I'm using these examples because they come up in these developments and how they come from lot coverage. So I think we're looking at that definition and then even adding into this article, this definitions article that we have in this document. So it's easily referenceable.
So we have definitions of what open space on a lot like this would be like. The Program 75 is helpful to do that way as well.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. Yeah, definitions of all that. We can copy.
Then maybe what we think about is instead of having a maximum lot coverage, we have a requirement for open space on properties. So we say X percentage has to remain open, and then by default, the rest of it can be lot coverage. So that we're capturing we're designating a specific percentage that has to remain open and free of any type of encumbrance. At all.
It's kind of showing the same thing backwards, right? Either lot coverage versus open space, or open space versus lot coverage. I don't know if it hurts to put a definition of open space in there.
So I think the difference, like, agreed, there's some where we have some things that are exempt from zoning. So for example, any gay man to somebody's house requires a permit that's allowed wherever you need it to be. As I mentioned, stairs to an entrance, provided it's not stairs to an entrance or onto the back. We generally consider we require permits for that because it's an easy egress or ingress or access, period. So we don't take those types of components into account when we're looking at lot coverage because it requires them, so we're not doing that in the regard. So if you flip it to a percentage that minimum percentage needs to remain open, then we're basically saying you have to have some space on property, then that's what you want to be. So it's kind of being an open space component.
Yeah, I like that better.
Yeah, that's where we get that idea behind PV, right? So we're going to specify an area of property because we're gaining that open space areas of property.
So I just still have the same thing though, Eric. If you find open space, say, let's just say minimum 25% of the lot has to be open space. And you find it. But if someone has to put in a stairs or some porch, it can be open space. A handicap ramp can be open space. I'm just trying to say that here.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, maybe look at a different way to approach this. In context of these incentives and these, the private housing, you can have some level of requirement of a certain amount of area that remains completely open and
A lot of natural area.
I mean, we all kind of know what we're saying, what we're shooting for. We're having trouble defining how do we put that into words, right? You know, once I err around some of these areas, we don't like, just get together and have 25% open space, they're all 2 foot squares.
Right.
Adjacent, you know.
That's a good point. That's why I think the definition of open space, you know, and it can include, contiguous.
Right.
Something to that effect.
Or 2 different plots that are contiguous. You know, it doesn't have necessarily one plot that needs to be this size to it. I think it's kind of what we're feeling.
I can look at that and see what options might be available. So yes, that's what we have for administrative review. And that pretty much brings us to the end of this section. The next section, definitions. Nothing's new here from previous discussions. The only thing I believe I added it after, it's not included here. Past it. So for housing development, we had a discussion about this several weeks ago about what it means. I was going to add this is a statutory definition that Act 47 is basically saying we have to accommodate so this goes back to the bonus stories as part of Act 47, what they're requiring. So I was going to add a statutory reference to this definition so that the numbers
We don't have a definition for short-term rental. Is that something that communities are putting in? Is it
Sarah, we do. It's not included. I think it's in the municipal code.
okay, so it doesn't need to be zoning then.
No, because we don't treat it as short-term rentals. We treat it as one, and then how it's managed or regulated is done through our municipal code.
Okay.
With other rental properties and similar codes. So we do have standards for short-term rentals. It's done through our I believe Chapter 15 of the municipal code. Chapter 15 and 17.
I thought so before, but when you use to make short-term rental use, just not necessarily for such a thing, but I'd like to look at that a little bit more.
Okay, we can do that.
I have a big definition. I think it's after, it's 15 years, 15 years.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Happy to make that big question.
Yes, thank you.
Eric, do you want to go back to the bonus story? Sure. So you said this language is required as part of Act 47?
Yes, because the bonus story they refer to and affordable housing development as defined in statute. So that's why I added the definition of affordable housing development.
So what statute has these, like, if you do bonus story, you get the maximum density?
That's correct.
Okay, so if they have affordable housing, they can exceed the maximum density up to 40%. So that's like looking at right there almost, that's like 70%. So
keep in mind, they can exceed, this is going to be a little tricky to enforce and to really to address in Winooski. Waste is written of affordable housing development. If you look at the definition, let me just get back down to that. I think it's really important to look at the definition of affordable housing development because at least 20% of the units or minimum of 5, whichever is greater, have to be affordable units. That is, unless it's not something that's only happen, that's not happening in our residential districts because that would put your total project like 25 units.
Housing development is 20% units or minimum of 5. So it could be smaller than 25 units.
It wouldn't need the definition. Well, it could be a project that's affordable housing development, but
If you like a 10-unit development and then have like 50% units be affordable housing, and the definition give that bonus.
I suppose they could, yes, but keep in mind also the bonus only applies to density and building. It does not increase lot coverage.
Okay, so I just say the maximum density permit in the district. So what is that related to? Density, how are you using that?
That's a great question because the legislature just not really uses density as a measure. So in most districts actually we don't use density as a measure of anything. So I think only our central business district, I think the one has a density standard of 16 units per acre. So I honestly really don't know. I think it's going to depend on the project itself and what we're proposing. And if they're, so for example, if they're proposing 10 units and they're going to be half of them affordable, then 40% of that would be 4 units. An additional story. So I think we have to look at it on project by project basis to see what they're proposing to give them the density bonus. And then also they have to meet reservoir standards as well. So they have to meet lot coverage, they have to meet setback, they have to meet parking, they have to meet all the other requirements that we have in place that automatically grant them relief from our standards because they're doing 4 units.
So density, your interpretation of that is units, not lot coverage.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And in this context, that is what they're referring to is units not lot coverage because they're basically creating incentive to build affordable housing and then because of the affordable units, they have more units with that bonus story.
So in theory, someone who's building 4 affordable units in one of our residential districts can build 40% more than that 4 because they're doing 100% affordable. So they can build like 6 units.
Well, it depends on what the project is. If they're only doing 4 total units, no, because they would meet the definition of affordable housing development.
Right, because it's a 5 unit. Okay. I'm trying to figure out like how this interacts with our rights and zoning systems on there. My other question is, how does this interface with what the housing commission in terms of overlay zoning district for affordable housing? Is that coverage yet? Even that overlay district will give us a percentage of affordable housing being needed, and then our incentives are focused on 3 plus in homeownership.
I think that's meeting 10, yes, is that we're looking at a requirement for inclusionary housing to apply to projects that meet a certain threshold, I think, and then it would be required in a certain number of units. And we can talk about this when it looks at that language and just kind of the mechanisms for affordable or inclusionary housing and the replacement housing regulations. So, but yes, the intent of those regulations would be that they'll be requirement on projects over a certain size regardless of your building. All single studios you have still affordability.
Yeah, and so the overlay district really will get at the affordability piece. Should ours be focused on the bedroom count and ownership pieces?
I think so. Well, like you're saying, you can take affordability piece out of our incentives.
Then I missed like sort of third into the area because we only have home ownership incentive, interesting incentives incorporating home into part of the bonus or looking at like how do bonus.
I see.
Is that requiring them to build affordable, which I think is much more than the audience, or we're requiring that to do it and then like please proving required to, so what should that?
Well, so I will say that part of statute, if we do add inclusionary zoning requirements, we do have to offer incentives for those projects. Statute does require that there is some low incentive being offered. So we will have to offer some component incentive to projects that do inclusionary zoning.
It will have to be built into the inclusionary zoning, like inclusionary zoning, and they would find out with us in the application and our regulations as well.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess if it's going to be actually incorporated into our work and then it's created and incorporated, it's potentially change based on what the regulations, but I'm looking like.
Potentially. I mean, the difference is what we have here in section 5.4 is really related to the primary housing, so the affordability and the bedroom count. So we still are remaining just, I guess we potentially push about some of the affordability counts because we cover under the inclusionary, but keep the bedroom count pieces in.
Yeah, have the ownership piece in.
Yes.
So it's going to be substantial to the affordability and consider.
Correct.
Does it make sense to do that now, or does it make sense to do that as we learn more about the overlay?
I would say we should not subscribe the affordability now because I don't know when we're going to be. I know we'll talk about we can talk about this later as well with our next one being housing mission, but I don't want to lose the affordability pieces now because we'll see that later. Inclusionary will be part of the zone, so we will be making this that time and actually have them drafted as section 16, 5, 17, so they be in as well, so we can make sure everything is internally consistent with that.
Great, thank you.
Yes, the affordable housing development definition is right statute.
Correct.
That makes sense because it is somewhat confusing because when I first read it, I think this is how you were doing it. It's 20% of the units up to a minimum of 5. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, 20% of the units, minimum of 5 meant that you had to have 25 units to reach that 5 threshold.
Yes.
The way I look at that, I understand that interpretation. So it's something that can be interpreted 2 different ways. And so I think it can't change it because what statute says that when I first read it, 20% was the override number. If I was just trying to have a unit in project to reach that threshold 5. You know what I'm saying?
So yeah, yes, I do. But the way that I interpret it, and my colleagues interpret it, is that basically your project needs to have at least 25 units.
Right, that's how I interpret it initially. Right, and what I was saying, I understand that interpretation as well.
Yeah, because it would be both at least 1% and then 5 units. If you do anything 5 or more, you have 5 units in affordability definition, you have 10 units in the affordability definition.
Yeah, and we interpret that way as well. So because in that case, you have 5 units and 100% of the
Yeah,
so
so it doesn't just go 25 units or
correct, but the minimum of 20% or 5 needs to be 25 units. If you're just going to do the minimum, it needs to be 25 units. If you're more than the minimum, then we're looking at different numbers and different project work, then we're looking for affordable units, so I think it's so good.
Well, I will tell.
Right. Okay. All the questions, all the discussion. So no other real changes in any of the rest of this. I don't believe from our last meetings. Let's skip all this stuff. Unless anybody has any questions, please tell me. Okay, so regarding to the Forest Code, we looked at this the first time we did our last meeting. So in the district, we had original bonus stories, but we still have original bonus stories. One of those options is housing affordability. Put in the option, which is reference the one we look at because that's the only thing every day. So we still have other options for a bonus story in our gateway, but only find gateway for examination and building standards. So those will remain the affordability pieces reference to section 5 and 4. Okay, moving on to cash frontage, building standard. We have a couple of changes we need to make based on statute. This is actually more just on lot size, just to better and we cover around 1 units in this district. Wanted to add some updated language to come in and recapture the projects for 3 unit, not just the 2 unit. And then under the use section, referencing back to section 2.4, there's a discrepancy between what we had in our section 2.4 and what we're saying in this section. So just to clarify, using reference back to section 2.4 on building table and then accessory structures with reference to accessory ones with reference to section 5.1. And then some amendments we filed last meeting, which are not related to the Act 47, but are more clean up that we've been tracking on. They're in this section, but we've been forward. The first change is clarification in this section, just reorganization of language. Under the roofs and parapet section, the primary change is related to yes, let's see, attic stories. So currently the regulations exempt attic stories from the height and stories in the gateway. So I'll take that back. In gateway, we measure gateway by either, well, I should say both number of stories and maximum wall height. So you can't see either of those. Attic stories are not included in the building height or the number of stories. So there's several projects that we've been proposed or generally designed that include a roof on as the attic story, which given the pitch of that roof, or I guess I say that the dimensions of the angles of the walls, that's the function as an story. So this item C is basically to say if you have a pitch that exceeds about 12 or 45% slope, so kind of that mansard side roof, that's counted as another story. You're not going to be able to put those in essence, at the benefit of the additional dwellings and living space, but not have to count towards your building height. So this is really to kind of capture that goal and we need to bring this piece into conformance with the code. The next section is signage. Again, so just clarification and organization.
I'm sorry, one thing, if I have a roof that's 12 or shower, I can use that space as living space if I got height.
Yes, you could. Yeah, I mean, as living space, so you're going to that's the policy minimum. And so you're going to get out of it. So we have kind of narrow living space in the middle, and have issues with things like that. So those spaces are going to be, it would be hard to use like that. I guess you have to figure out a way to do it.
You just think of cave homes that don't have dormers on it, they put bedrooms up there.
Sure, yeah. This is going to prevent the whole story. So our signage main change here is just related to sign lighting. We have the lighting, so basically saying this, you don't have to shield it in. Along with the sign itself is against lighting, really just signs. So we light here for signage. And then the next section on mechanical equipment. Organizational again, the main change here is related to some language under mechanical equipment. Basically say that any type of exhaust or guaranteed fencing has to be cannot be located on the street side, regardless of how ground it is. We don't have things where we've had to have some teams that are practicing design because they had mechanical equipment high on floors. So that's 4 and 5 is added for actually the instance for this is actually 4 quarters. Because I have the ring saddle, that's the building. Technically that's the equipment, but because of the size of it, there's no evidence for it adequately. So really this was designed to say, okay, we understand some things happen, it's just so you can't do anything about it. So it's really intended to screen really have set far away from those cases as possible, so it's not intrusive. Like the use and make sure what they're doing with their brain silo, it works. I think they still have to mention as well, as to have it in also better. But that's what I'm for is that if you have it, it's just so unbelievable, it's necessary for operation. We need to take it back.
I don't think they're going off
Well, if they are, they're off the deck, so they need to do that.
They've been for decades. Like, we'll talk about like, a huge flower. Yeah, and even before that, like, we used to have a drink tower water front and everything, so that when we let down.
Right, yeah. So, and that is intended to basically say,
It's a pretty anything that inside about that it incorporates actually the artificial building something, because that's sort of the green title site. It's also modulus. It's on really.
yes, I would think to do that because they don't know the equipment to be. So if it doesn't have all the equipment to building and to make up, negate the equipment, I wouldn't want them to, I don't think it's possible for how they contribute the equipment to make it build in there. And let's keep in mind, that's the only example of all the equipment constructed or modifications any project anyway, where does that come from? So it's specific for specific uses and certain where does it even apply?
But those, I think the hospitals, huge air systems, they have to incorporate our other kind of similar courses, even towards the house.
So, and then the next tier is really just after that, we want to make sure that the fire department has their equipment very much in the most convenient for them because it's a safety issue. And so if they want something in front of them, then they should be able to have it because either they place their equipment or people place their equipment in proximity to fire hydrants, in proximity to ease those in proximity basically to not blocks where they held it. So I want to make sure that the life safety defenses are in the location where the fire department wants them to be. So that's what I consider to capture. So it is something equipment. It's not in the end of the street, and that's okay because it's basically that cover. They will see in front of the building. Any of the strobe lights that indicate that that's where the fire is, some people still on. So also we want the fire department to be able to see what the building is, and so if they put something outside the front of the building, that's okay too. And they do that anyway because under the AEA are technically agency jurisdiction. And I think that is a term, or it's a defined term, but it depends on the situation. So for example, in this instance, the fire department is agency jurisdiction. The EPA jurisdiction with environmental issues. It's really more to say this is the group that is in charge of this thing. So
There's definition of clear sidewalk, I see all the caps on. What's that mean exactly? Where's that definition?
that is in the definition of definition B. So yeah, words that all caps are definition, they're all included in definition B in definition 40 here. So the first sidewalk is basically the sidewalk space, or the first sidewalk is the street space that needs to be up to. So pretty much the sidewalk area is going to be for sidewalk. And so that brings us to the end of this. Yeah, I also am striking this affordable housing. I don't know this last time, but there's language in the gateway about affordable housing, and it specifically references back to the bonus story. This is pulling bonus story out of this section, and there's standards for what that bonus story is based on statute. This I just need conflict with this section, which is redundancy, so I'm proposing to strike this. But we'll have a bonus story for statute will carry requirements for that. Since this was specifically the bonus story that we're striking anyway from the gateway district. So that is a walkthrough of the changes that are going to come here at our next meeting. So any questions on any of that stuff? Like I said, at your meeting, propose changes, add more hearings, do whatever you need to do at that point. But this is the first opportunity to take full comments on the units proposed.
I'm going to do time about 7:54. So we want to get into the session Bible search again on the 7th.
So the only reason I include these in the agenda is not to actually review language because I still want a discussion about form subjects here. Really, depends on if you need this section in the agenda. Really, what we're what the including how the requirements are and replacing housing requirements are. That's not to say this is all that would be in there and this is what the final version will look like. It's more just to get familiar with kind of the regulatory structure and what these regulations generally intend to do. What the purpose is, how they function, not as much the details of the numbers and the statistics, but more kind of the overall framework. So I was not intending to walk through these documents any edits at this time. Like I said, I would prefer waiting until we have this discussion with the commission and have a deep dialogue with them at our next so I get our next meeting in June. So this is just more familiarizing with these concepts and what this looks like. Thank you very much.
Okay, so
I will postpone for hold on discussing these in detail.
okay. So what are the updates then? How many schools? See you there.
Not sure any particular answers. Yes, collection. We approved users to do a learning on the framework, producing the system that's earlier this year. We presentation from the city on the study and also direction to have them match to us with updated design. Some recommendation included narrowing streets, making many routes and intersections for traffic, and removing all parking along the corridor and putting belts on both sides. Council asked to modify that to retain tree belt on one side and bring another, as these sites that we've been seeing. I think that we see on the line because there's going to be increasing density in the area that would have parking usage, and also want to retain the flexible space on street parking in case these change in the future, where that's usually easier compared to like protect the bike path or bus parking versus the expense of needing to modify the street in the future if you have to go to tree all. So they're going to recommend back to us probably at least 2 weeks from now, and then we another opportunity for engagement and either that plan or not. The zoning study is aligned to fact hill, and so it's scheduled for 1%. We actually have that like scheduled in the near term, so we're talking about like 15 years out sort of thing.
We're going to have those on. We don't have any lots of water. So
I don't know for sure. I know the fact on the water line. Zoning commission. I'm not sure if they're included. Okay. Oh, we are presenting our annual electricity prioritization June 10th, so I'll be on the sheet. Looking at that, we'll have some thoughts on commission work we have in here. However, I'm not sure that year, I think this group and we'll make months. Yeah.
did you do that with hearing on the changes to the for the?
Oh, that's the thing. Yeah, we done the day we got those changes, so we're good. So thank you.
Great. So what do you work?
I don't have any additional on CPs.
Okay. Other business? Anyone have any other business?
So this is around our next meeting will be May 3rd. That'll be the 2 weeks. That'll be public. It has to be on for amendments we look at. The second meeting monthly, said 1 year first. We also have an online option for them. Also, as a reminder, we're scheduling next meeting with the planning commission for June 25th. That's Tuesday. It will leave us 16 start, and it will replace our Senate June meeting. So we now have a meeting on June 27th. Yes, June 27th. Our Senate meeting is not June meeting. I think that's normal.
And this is where I will be able to attend the 23rd. So.
Okay, thank you.
There's one county wants to start on hearing. We should do it, Eric. Eric, remind me what day is?
June 20th.
Okay, so it's the end of June.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no business. You know, we do anything work anyway. Discussion. By work.
By motion, how was the hiring process going through, please, Eric?
I don't know the next part of the business, but I have not involved in this, so I don't know how many things or what process we were.
Wait,
I do not know. I think I believe reading the keynote list for some reason,